Welcome to ABA Inside Track, episode 31 on problem solving. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, and with me, as always, are my fabulous co-hosts.
Hey, Rob, it's Diana.
Hey,
And it's
Diana.
Jackie. Hi,
Hey,
Rob.
Jackie.
Hi, Diana.
Hey, Jackie.
And with us, not as always, is Dr. Judah Axe. Hey, Judah.
Hello, good to be here.
Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Oh, we're very, very happy to have you here as a guest.
He's in the studio.
Yes, he's in the studio.
That's right.
Live.
Live in studio to us, but not to you.
In the dining room studio.
The acoustics in here are great.
I got to soundproof this dining room. So if you are new to the show, ABA Inside Track is a podcast where we talk about research in behavior analysis. And each week we pick a topic, and this week it is problem solving based on the suggestion of our special guest. So, Judah, before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are? Who are you? What are you doing here?
Sure.
How'd you get in our house?
Yeah, someone let me in. And
It was me.
Jackie. It's great to be here. Who am I? I teach at Simmons College. I teach in both the special education program, and I direct the master's program in special education. I also teach in the behavior analysis, master's and PhD programs, as well as our new online master's program in behavior analysis. I've been there 9 years. Before that, I did graduate school at the Ohio State University in special education and ABA. And I love being in the Boston area where I can consult a little bit in some schools and conduct research with students at Simmons and be a part of a fun community of people like you all doing podcasts and going to conferences and things like that.
Beautiful. Well, it is such a pleasure to have you here. And you wanted to talk when we suggested, well, Jackie, because you reached out and we said, hey, we need guests. Come on our show.
That's my
Please,
job.
for the love of God, someone.
I'm the guest grabber.
It's not just the three of us because that's how we wanted. No one wants to be on our show. No. So Judah suggested problem solving because Judah, that's something that you have been that you're currently working on, have been
You're
working
good at
on.
problem solving?
I have a lot of problems. That's why it works for me. I'm trying to solve them.
So you're
and
just
I'm
here for help.
looking to the literature for how to solve my own problems. I'm trying to pinpoint the exact moment when I got into this area, but it had a lot to do with Dave Palmer, who's written about this topic, and going to his presentations at conferences and reading his articles and chapters on it really interested me. My maybe indirectly, but one of my main professors at Ohio State, Nancy Neef, conducted some of the research on problem solving, so I was influenced by her and thought it's a really great topic where it's behavior to get other behavior, and it's complex. It's not straightforward like teaching a lot of the skills that we teach, but how do we analyze it, more complex things in terms of behavior analysis, and again teach some behaviors to get other behavior. It's a great topic. Yeah,
Excellent.
I think it's one of those topics, too, that we as behavior analysts need to look at, since it's the one that, like, traditional psychologists like, you can't do this.
Exactly.
All you guys can do is just teach using shaping.
That's right. Yeah. When I talk about this, a reason is that, we need to be able to explain all behavior, including what's going on the inside and problem solving. It's one of those complex things that, we need to prove to psychology or other fields that we can handle it.
Psychology.
I'm going to prove nothing to them.
I whispered that because that's all it deserves. I'm just kidding.
Oh,
I love
so
my
that's
colleagues.
a little harsh.
I'm just kidding.
I'm just kidding.
But before we get into talk of the articles and a little bit more about your research, Judah, how does one define problem solving in behavior analytic terms? Because the thought process of the mind, and I don't think that's going to cut it, right? Or did it? Did I get it? How'd I do?
It's using your mind. That's pretty much
All right, we did it. Yay!
Throwing in a little ego and things like that. Yeah. No, great question. So I do a two-part thing. First, define a problem. And so a problem is an antecedent situation. There's a motivating operation, and there's no behavior immediately available with which to reduce the deprivation or aversive stimulation, though the behavior is in your repertoire. You've done behavior or behaviors like it in the past, and so you face a problem, and problem solving is engaging in behavior to arrive at the solution. And so there's lots of ways that can happen, but the way I like to talk about it is really moving stuff around. And so manipulating stimuli, moving stimuli around in the environment or covertly. It's behaving, it's moving stimuli, reordering them, putting them in different locations to try to arrive at the solution.
Do you have a good example for us?
Sure. Yeah. The one I talk about a lot with a student who I've been working on this topic with is losing your keys. I don't know if you all have lost your keys ever or can't find your keys when it's time to leave the house, but
This doesn't sound familiar to me
yeah,
at all.
I know. It's yeah. It's most people haven't experienced that. It's a common one, and so you're ready to go. It's time for work. You got the kids ready in the car seat, and no keys. Right? That's a problem. You've got that deprivation or some sort of motivating operation that increases the value of getting out of the house and getting in your car and going to work. But you found keys in the past. You know how to do that, but that behavior isn't currently available. You start looking, you start moving stuff around, right? You engage in problem-solving behavior, lifting things up, thinking about where did I last leave them, when did I last have them. You're moving around, things covertly, and engage in a lot of behavior to arrive at that solution of lifting up that final thing. There they are, and solving the problem.
In the freezer.
In the freezer, yeah.
Why did I put them in the freezer? I'll never know.
Yeah, some people do, but I've heard put their keys in the refrigerator with food that they want to take with them so that they'll remember the food. They can't leave without their keys. Then they go get their keys in the fridge. There's their food that they want to take home with them.
That's really smart.
Yeah.
That's a problem I have with all the keyless ignitions, because you just put your keys somewhere and the car just turns on as long as it's near enough.
Yeah,
Can your car drive away without the keys?
Not unless the keys are somewhere in like the front seat of the car. Even on the dash, they won't go. But you could technically start your car and sort of start going somewhere. If, say, you had a copy of your spouse's keys and they were really close to you and they're saying goodbye as you push the ignition, it could happen.
Does the car slow down with the keys are not around?
It has not happened to me. I just throwing it out there as a possibility that's sort of irrelevant.
I'm worried. I worry about that.
Now you're worried. Okay.
Right, no.
You would have to engage in all sorts of other behavior to problem solve that.
So the types of problem solving behavior could involve, you said, moving things around in your current environment, right? If your problem is something that's lost. But what if it's a academic type problem?
Yeah.
Like a math problem.
So I think of problem solving as happening either at the overt level or the covert level, right? So lost keys, pretty much at the overt level. You're moving things around in your house. If you've got math problems on a worksheet and you're going through them, you're engaging in problem-solving behaviors. You're carrying the one and borrowing numbers, and you're doing that pretty much at the overt level that somebody could watch a third grader, say fourth grade or fifth grade or something like that, do those problems. But then we do them covertly too, right? What's 43 plus 62? Most of us can't rattle off. Yeah, Jackie.
Right,
I thought Jackie had it.
105? 105?
I don't know if you say so. Most of us can't, immediately emit that behavior, but we engage in some covert behavior. We add the numbers in our head and then arrive at it. One Dave Palmer tells that I also love is a problem that we can solve covertly mostly. That is just fun. Is he'll ask, "What's the 10th letter after J?"
Oh,
T.
I don't know.
Yes. And I know that because I've used that example a lot of times. But the first time, right, it's usually people do some covert behavior and some overt things with their fingers, moving their fingers. And so we can all do it, but it's not, again, immediately available. The type of behaviors in our repertoire. We engage in behavior. Skinner called it precurrent behavior. I like to call it problem-solving behavior. It's more straightforward of what it is. But we engage in behavior and arrive at T, or the solution to something, yeah.
So we have two articles that we're going to sort of frame our discussion around, though that won't be all we talk about. But these were ones, Judah, that you had suggested, and they are A Problem-Solving Approach to Social Skills Training in Employment Settings with Mentally Retarded Youth by Park and Gaylord-Ross from the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis, 1989, and Training Preschool Children to Use Visual Imagining as a Problem-Solving Strategy for Complex Categorization Tasks by Kizamore, Carr, and LeBlanc from the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis, 2011. So two very, very different types of problem solving. Now, why did these pop out at you? These are your your faves. You read them over and over, or they just capture a lot of the crux of problem-solving behavior?
So I've been working on a review with a couple students, and there's 8 or so 9 applied studies that specifically use problem solving the way Skinner talked about it, the way Dave Palmer talked about it. And so these are 2 of them. And why I picked
a short list.
These, it is a short list. Yeah. There's more research in basic research on problem solving behavior, but in terms of applied research, not a whole lot. Yeah, that specifically used this idea of defining problems and problem solving the way I did, the way Skinner did and Dave Palmer, and this idea of precurrent behavior.
So like Sultan.
Sultan.
Is he a chimpanzee? Or is he an orangutan?
Oh, yes.
And he could push the box over and get the banana?
Yep.
Yeah.
He solved that problem.
Yes.
Real fast.
Yes.
Skinner did the same. He replicated that procedure with a pigeon touching the banana.
But what was the pigeon's name is what I need to know.
Pigeon number XY5.
That's right. There's a great
Sorry,
that's good there, because like I said, there are basic, and there's animal training examples of it. So there's the guy Kaselnick who's presenting at the ABBA conference coming up in
Can't
Denver.
wait.
Yeah, and he has videos and taught crows to solve problems. So he teaches them 9 individual behaviors, and then to solve the ultimate behavior, they have to synthesize, put together those 9 of taking a stick and using it to move a other thing, that then they use that thing to open a box, and so on.
That's pretty awesome.
That's
pretty
really
neat.
cool.
Yeah. But in terms of applied studies, teaching kids, and some of these studies, like the Kaisermore et al. One is typical kids, and Park and Gaylord-Ross is individuals with disabilities. So there's a mix of disability or not. And then why these 2 out of the 8 or 9 is these are the ones that I've been using to inform the research study that I'm working on. And the Kaisermore et al. One is just really nice, really well done, really interesting.
Way to go, April.
Neat application of problem solving. And the Park and Gaylord-Ross, I think, is less known, but I think that the strategy that they used also is really promising. And so the study I'm working on is we put those 2 together to teach a problem solving skill.
2 great tastes go great together.
Yeah.
Is the Park Gaylord-Ross one of the seminal studies in problem solving, or is there more older articles?
There are older ones. Yeah, applied studies. Parsons was an author who 1976. That's I think the first one in our review, and he did problem solving with math skills. He used the same analysis. Yeah.
Cool.
The 4-step analysis for decoding decision, performance, and evaluation.
Yep.
I'm sure we'll talk about that more.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, actually, that's a good segue. I'm sure we'll talk about that more. And now let's do that.
now.
You go, Rob.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, why don't we start on the Park and Gaylord-Ross article on problem solving with social skills training.
Yeah, so I think this is pretty interesting how they started in their experiments. So in the baseline, they had audio cassettes in the participants' shirt pockets so they could hear what they were saying. That's actually fairly clever.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I would have thought of that. I don't know why.
Where would you put it?
I probably would be like, I'm going to creepily follow you around. Like,
I'm under the table.
Right? You don't know I'm here. I'm not sure. I would
yeah.
have even thought about putting it on their person.
We probably have more sophisticated tools today with
That fun
clipping
pen.
on.
Yeah.
Oh,
You
yeah,
can get
or a
The wrist,
shirt
the
wrist cufflink.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
make
cufflink
that?
with a
A
microphone.
microphone
Yeah, they do
cufflink?
actually.
They're very small. And cheap.
Not like Get Smart with the shoe phone.
Yeah.
Could be a shoe phone, right.
Yeah, but I thought that was pretty clever because then you're going to capture everything that person is saying. So that's
Yeah.
a clever way. Instead of like someone creepily following you around,
Yeah.
which
Trying to take
could-
shorthand
yeah.
notes.
and could promote
Yeah.
reactivity too, right? So
Yeah.
That seems
good
likely.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Well, as could being recorded, but that doesn't seem to have had an impact
yeah.
here. Do you want to explain about participants? And
Let's go back and make sure that folks who either haven't gotten to the research yet or would like to read the research or maybe just want to make sure that they read it correctly, the purpose of the study. So, I mean, it's in the title, but just to clarify.
Yeah, so they wanted to teach social skills, and they wanted to see whether role-playing would be an effective way to teach social skills, or this 4-part model based on McFall's 1980s problem-solving model. How, if you could use problem-solving, would it then promote social skills?
Now, that problem-solving, or that model specifically, seemed very, very complicated. when it was broken down into the 7 steps, it did seem a little more, okay, this is reasonable. But, role play is something I think we go to because it is relatively easy. I mean, even if you're doing, behavior skills training, role playing still is a component of it.
Right.
But then when you go into that, okay, well, let's break down. You need to think, what are the choices? What are you faced with? It seems very, very heady. And the idea of prompting that just seemed beyond, I don't think I could even explain that to, a typically developing adolescent or young adult, how to do that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it is a bunch of steps. We could talk about them for the listeners. Something we probably all do, but it's within microseconds. It's little teeny decisions that we make. You get to a cocktail party. I know we all go to cocktail parties. I don't know. That's just an example, as people say, I guess. We'll go to a bar, and there's a bunch of people there, and you're like, ooh, should I go talk to them? I'm not sure. Should I go talk to them? I'm not sure. When I talked to those guys in the past, they were really intense, and I don't know. But, we make those little decisions in momentary moments in a social situation. That's what they tried to teach.
Is that something that you did too?
So we did something like it. It was not as complex of a social situation, I guess. More just one-on-one, where they had a few more things going on in the stairs, a few more people around, I guess. Yeah.
Neat.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was thinking when I read it. So I know we're kind of like going all over the place here, but
we'll get there.
They have breaking down the 4 pieces of the McFall study, but then specifically in the context of the problem-solving training that they did, there were 7 rules that they taught the individuals to follow.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But each of the rules is they have to figure out what's happening, what are my options for responding, weighing those options, deciding which one to do, engaging in the behavior, and then reading the response of the partner in order to determine if they picked the right thing to do, basically. Yeah. And that's exactly what I was thinking when I was reading it, is if you were to take the time to go through each of those steps and figure out the answer, the moment would be past.
Right.
Because we do it so instantaneously.
Yep. Yeah. Can you
seems
teach
really
that?
hard.
Yeah. Can you really teach that? Yeah. And how long should you expect it to take before people can use it functionally, without people just walking away because you're still on step 3 and someone's long gone. Yeah.
And that was the problem they were facing too, is they changed topics or they wouldn't hold a conversation, or at least 2 of the participants wouldn't hold a conversation. So, okay, so now I need to okay, it's not working. I'm leaving.
Wait, hang on, don't go anywhere. I'm on step 4.
All right,
so it's hard.
It's hard. So let me tell you a little bit about the participants. So there were 3 participants. Jeff was 18 years old. He had what they call intellectual disability nowadays.
Yes.
And
current language. Yeah.
Current language. He worked at a restaurant, and his job was to wash dishes and clean tables. And he did great at that job. However, he didn't really do well communicating with his coworkers. So that's where they wanted to work with him. Trisha was 16 years old. She worked at a beauty college. That's interesting. Do we still have beauty colleges?
We were just talking about that, actually.
We were, because
today.
I was thinking about going.
So there is really?
Yes.
No, you were thinking of cutting the children's hair. And so I very quickly went through my problem-solving steps and came to the conclusion that's probably a bad idea.
Yes.
Oh, there must be, right?
But your problem solving didn't end there, because you didn't just say that's a bad idea, Diana. You said maybe you'd like to go to just a few sessions of beauty school to learn how to cut hair, and then you could totally do it.
I did 2 problem solving.
You sure did.
I had them
well,
both.
I think there probably is, because I think Vidal Sassoon still counts.
That's what it's called. Yeah.
They have the short hair on one side, the long hair on the other side.
I'm just going to get a Floby.
Yeah.
Is that what that thing's called?
Oh, yeah.
The suck
it
cut?
sucks and it cuts.
It definitely does suck.
Well, what she did at the beauty salon was she arranged the perm curlers by color. Okay. She arranged chemicals in alphabetical order, and she cleaned up the laboratory. So
I never realized. I mean, I never thought about how technical.
Me neither, actually. I mean, if you think
about it's like hair coloring and perm products, there's probably a lot of chemicals.
Oh, yeah. That's why you can be a beauty school dropout.
That's right.
So really,
Sandy.
her problem. Oh, Grease. I'm just gonna tell you, there's no Sandy here. It's just Grease. Her problem was during her break, she didn't initiate conversations with anyone, so she just kind of wandered around alone and sat by herself. So that was something that they needed to work on. And Claire was our last participant, and she was 18 years old. She was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, and she lived at home with her mom and worked at the same beauty college as Trisha. And she cleaned showcases, tables, chairs, in the lobby area.
So it said you should have a lot of opportunity to interact
And she did not.
with people, but she
Right.
did not. But
So
all
she
of
would-
these participants,
She'd respond, but she'd go off to ask.
Yeah.
Well, off to ask with conversation. She'd
Right,
change
yeah, but it
topics.
seemed like all
That's the
of
worst.
all of these participants had a vocal repertoire, and they could
Yes.
engage conversationally, but they weren't.
Which you said was a prerequisite for this problem-solving skill, right? So you have to have behaviors that are already in the repertoire of the individual
Right.
prior to engaging in problem-solving.
Yep. Yeah. I think one other neat thing of this article, in the first paragraph, it talks about, this is 1989, so probably conducted mid to late 80s, and this transition talking about where people with disabilities, intellectual disabilities, mostly working in sheltered workshop settings, and they're saying now people are starting to actually work in real life settings in the real world, and hey, they'll need to start to interact with other people who are around. So I think it's a neat historical, thing there too.
That is
Yeah.
kind of neat. Yeah, I think I missed that.
I mean, I think it sort of went back to some of our episodes we did on preparing for adulthood in the sense of, hey, it's 89, we're going to be there so soon, and you're like, hey, it's 2017. It's not quite as far as I think we probably hoped it would have been in 1989.
Right.
But, oh well, that's why problem solving. That's why these models are important, or one reason they're important. So we have our problems now; they need to be solved.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the problems that they were trying to reduce were mumbling, increasing social initiation, and conversational expansion. Make sense?
Mumbling was just Jeff.
I believe so.
Just Jeff.
Yes.
Just
Yeah.
Jeff. Just Jeff mumbled.
There's also one of them targeted termination, so terminating a conversation. How do you end that appropriately?
That's hard.
Yeah.
So these are
I
common.
need problem solving for some of
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Anyway, gotta go.
Yeah. Someone's talking. Like, yeah.
It's just awkward ending a conversation. It is awkward.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, anyway, I'm gonna go now.
Yeah.
I'm actually really awkward at that because I just want to keep going. I'm like that awkward long hugger. I like hug far too long.
I know.
And then I'm like that awkward. I know you want to go. I can read all the cues that you want to leave now, but I'm going to keep talking to you. Yep, that's
Just
me.
one more thing. Just
yeah,
one more thing.
But wait,
Right.
and you're like, your jacket's on, you're like zipped up, the car's been started, you're like leaving, and I'm like, wait.
Oh, I have those problems when I have to leave a meeting to go to another meeting, and someone's like going and they're very passionate about what they're talking about, and I'm too embarrassed to say I have to go, so I'm sort of just slowly moving to the door.
Yes.
Maybe if I move slow enough, they won't notice I've left, but it's always very awkward.
It's like unwrapping a mint in a meeting. You just gotta do it.
Just
Just
do
go
it,
for it.
like a Band-Aid.
Yeah, just rip it open. You gotta just stand up with all your books,
I'm leaving
and
this
all your
meeting.
papers.
Sometimes trying to get out of a conversation, I feel the need to like do a big timeout, like a
Right.
gestural sign, like anything I say I know won't stop you, but yeah, maybe this big sign will.
Look out behind you.
That was funny. Okay, so we kind of know what happened in baseline. All they did in baseline was put the little audio cassette within the pocket of the participant and then just let them go about their day.
They did tell them they were going to be recorded.
Right, yeah. It wasn't secretive.
Right.
Yeah, it was like, put this in your
A
pocket.
1989 recorder. I don't know how secretive you could have
Yeah,
been.
no, right.
Put this
out of
very
Strap
large
this on your
thing.
back.
Yeah.
Well, then for the first condition, they had the role-playing condition. And in this condition, the trainer would show an illustration of the beauty salon, maybe with somebody walking in. And then they would ask, let's say Trisha, since she worked at the beauty salon, what might you say in this situation? And then Trisha was expected to respond like, I should go over and say hello to the customer and ask them how their day was. So they would prompt that response if it wasn't correct. And then they would provide, corrective feedback or positive feedback depending on the response. And then they would practice. So that's what they did in this role play condition.
And then that didn't quite do it for anybody. So
You spoiled it. We didn't get to the results yet.
I mean, there's the next part of the study. I assume they would have stopped if role playing had been a big hit.
That's true. Judah, since this is your wheelhouse, do you want to talk about the problem-solving condition?
Yeah, I can talk about that. The problem-solving condition consisted of these four ideas that Diana talked about of decoding was one. Here they are: decoding, decision, performance, and evaluation. And then that boiled down to 7 rules, they called them. And so they would show them a similar situation of someone's approaching you at work or at a break. I think it's neat, actually. They targeted during this breaks at work or washing the dishes for one of the participants. It's like these situations where you're not heads down work where you're supposed to be doing things on your own, but there are situations where there's usually social. People are being social at a break in the break room or washing dishes. I actually washed dishes in college and at a restaurant, and you were social. You chatted with the other guys in the kitchen. You know, I did at least.
After intervention.
Right.
After I went through the 7 rules, I was like, what about this guy? I don't know. So the 7 steps were what's happening, and to just label that and describe that. And the second rule, what are 3 things that I could do? So what's it's called the decision skill. And then the third one is alternatives. What might happen if I did them? So someone's approaching me. What are 3 things I could do? I could say hi. I could wave. I could walk away. If it was done now, I think I could look at my phone or something like that.
Right.
And then step 3 is what would happen if I did? What would happen if I said hi? What would happen if I waved? What would happen if I walk away? What would happen if I look at my phone? And then rule 4, which is better? And then rule 5, select one. So choose one of those possibilities. Emit it, do it, is step 6, rule 6. And the final one is, how did I feel about how it went? And so they answered that. I felt great. I felt annoyed. I felt uncomfortable, something like that. So it was those 7 steps. What's happening? What are 3 things I could do? What would happen if I did each? Pick one, emit it, and how did I feel about how it went? A lot of steps to do.
Nice.
Diana's shaking her head like that.
It just seems so hard.
Yeah. And I've asked people when I've presented this, do you think you could teach that to individuals you're working with? And it seems like a lot of steps. It does. Yeah.
I think, actually, as I was reading it, I was like, wow, I need to do this in my real life. Like, for people, like people that are really impulsive.
But you do it.
That's right.
And,
But I may not.
and you read the social situation just
But that's
automatically.
I think you're right, that's impulsive people don't.
Right.
They just start talking. Right?
I
They,
don't.
Right?
That's
I
what
have
I'm
the
saying.
opposite problem.
Yeah.
And some people mull it over,
Right.
mull it over.
I think I'm more of the impulsive person where I'm like, oh,
Nervous.
here's something I've thought of right now. I'm going to do it. And then
That's right.
after the fact, I'm like, in my evaluation, my rule 7, because I get to that point.
Yeah,
Like,
I screwed up. I should not.
probably should not have done that.
See, I'm like 5 years later. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I should have said that
It's 2
in
ends of
that
the spectrum, right?
conversation.
And
Right.
impulsive need to slow down a bit and
Whatever the opposite of impulsive
Speeding
is.
up.
Too much self-control
Right.
of to overthinking, needs to just
Yeah.
try something, pick something, do it, see how it goes.
We'll work on
be more,
fluency of choosing with you.
confidence.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a real problem for me. I think that's why I am reacting so strongly to this, because I feel like these are really challenging rules to incorporate into your daily social life for anyone.
Yeah,
And then in
yeah.
particular, if you have difficulty understanding a social situation at all, or maybe have limited practice with that, or limited vocal skill with the types of interactions, this just seems really challenging.
It does seem challenging.
But the data.
No, I know, it's great. That's why it's so great.
I think about adolescents with Asperger's, adolescents or young adults or Asperger-like qualities, where say, I want to do better in social situations. Please give me some skills so I can get a date or something like that.
This would be
And
it, right?
Yeah, this could help. Yeah, say, okay, you need to slow down. Here's some steps. Think about what's happening. What are 3 things you could do? What would happen if you did each, right? You could keep being by yourself in the corner. You could go up and approach somebody and say hello, and my name is Judah. Nice to meet you. Or you could
What's
go
your
home.
sign?
What's your
Right.
sign? Right. Could try a pickup line. I could try this pickup line. I could try this pickup line. What would happen? And pick one. Do it.
Right.
Don't just sit there. Do it. Or maybe sitting there is the one you pick.
But then
and
evaluate it after,
yeah,
right?
How do I feel? I felt crappy just sitting in the corner by myself. I'm going to try something different next time. Yeah, I think with that population, it could be promising.
Do you find that the people that you're teaching or talking to are working with more impaired populations, so where this may be more challenging to teach because of it's so complex? Because I totally get what you're saying about, like, maybe kids that are in mainstream, maybe they're, in high school, and
Yeah.
it might be easier to teach because their skill set is more complex.
Yeah, I think what I was getting at actually is if there's a establishing operation,
Right.
if someone's motivated I really want, because this is a lot of effort. This
Yes.
is really hard, right? To learn, to master, to get all 7 of those steps, do them, practice them, admit them in a natural context. You know, if I don't care about a social situation, I don't care about talking to people at break or while I'm washing the dishes, I'm totally fine on my own, listening to music or whatever, then I'm not, maybe I'll do it and you can give me tokens for doing these things, but I'm probably not going to be very successful in a natural setting without reinforcement, say. But if there's an EO, I want to do it, might work better.
I like that. Yeah, that makes sense.
And the idea here, too, is that you're practicing typical scenarios that you're going to be encountering, right? And practicing what those options are for action and sort of playing out in practice how that might turn out, right? Because you can't go through all of this in a split second when you need to decide if you're going to say hi or walk away or get out your phone. So you're going to base those decisions, and that's what we all do, base those decisions on our past history.
Right.
This just breaks it down so that it has, language and rules attached to each of those pieces, so that maybe someone who has less experience with it can tap in better and label what's happening kind of in slow motion in practice, right?
Yeah.
I like it.
And I hadn't thought about till your comment that one of those is you got to pick one. You can't just be apathetic and keep mulling it over. Step 6 is admit. You got to pick one and do it, right? Which helps probably push people who have a hard time doing it. So, yeah.
So we all agree this seems really, really hard. So there's no way they got good results, right?
The results are phenomenal. They really are. When we are looking at let's talk about Trisha. She's in figure 2. If you're following along in your article, you're looking at initiations, expansion, and then termination. During baseline, she has low levels across all of her baseline conditions. And we didn't tell you it was a multiple baseline design.
It was.
Across
behaviors.
Yep. So they do have a really nice staggered baseline to
And
demonstrate
the other thing we didn't tell you
control.
is that there's a follow-up in the actual location.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the other thing we didn't tell you is that someone had to go through those videotapes and
The audio
code.
tapes.
Yeah, those audio tapes and code 30
Expansions,
minutes
initiations. Right.
of the behavior that was recorded.
I liked the mumbling definition. If they couldn't hear it, they scored it as mumbling.
That's right.
Diana has, I think, some post-traumatic stress from when people are like, we're going to code a complex behavior. Because you always find it and you're like, ah!
I know. I always write in circle like, oh, God.
No!
Thank God it wasn't me.
Play coding. Baseline was low. When we went to the role play condition for Trisha, responding was very similar to baseline. We saw no increasing trend. But then following the training, during the training, we see an increase for initiations from about 0 to around, 11 initiations in 30 minutes, which is kind of a lot compared to 0.
More than me.
Yeah. You did see an increasing trend with expansions as well as for the termination, we saw it all the way up to 3. So it went from 0 to 3 with appropriate terminations. And then they did a follow-up, and for initiations remained high during follow-up conditions. Expansions decreased slightly, but not to baseline levels. Mm-hmm. And the termination was fairly variable. I'm sad that they ended it on a decreasing trend, but that happens sometimes. I understand, but
end of the semester.
Yeah, right. Sometimes something happens like that, but it was doing real well. Yeah. And then boop, one data point. We'll just call that one an outlier. Yeah. But yeah, for Trisha, the whole process of problem solving really was effective. And you see similar results for Clara as well. During process training, there's an increasing trend across all 3 behaviors. Jeff, for some reason, they did not run role play.
Yeah.
Right.
They didn't say it in the manuscript, I don't think.
Yeah.
But they're like, surprise!
Yeah.
Maybe Jeff was the last one they ran.
Or maybe it was the first one.
Or the first, and they said, "Oh, let's compare this with role play."
Yeah.
Or
Call the author.
They mentioned it, but they just said all the participants. They didn't specify anything about Jeff, but they did mention that in the role play sessions, everyone did great. Everyone understood what they were supposed to do, and they could role play properly. They just never then would admit the behavior
Right.
in any of the probes or in the actual
Yeah.
break times.
So I don't know where Jeff was in that,
And they
but
just said, let's not bother with this.
His decrease in mumbling looks amazing.
right.
Yes.
So
Just
Yeah.
near 0 levels
Yeah.
in follow up.
50 in baseline.
Way to go, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
And then we saw an increasing trend for initiations and an increasing trend in the process training, and then more of some stable responding between 20 and 30 expansions during that 30 minutes, which is, fairly good when he was at near 0 levels before. So
Judah, I mean, you're working on more research. Is it just always this easy? Sort of you go through the problems and let's practice this a little bit. You got something wrong. Let's try again. I mean, because that's really seemed to be the crux of the procedure, was just going through and the training of the problem solving 7 steps.
Yeah. I don't think so. I think that they're...
Oh, good. I was really worried. I was just really terrible, and I never thought of using these.
I think the procedure section in this article was short, was not a lot of details, and we'll see in the other article a lot more procedural details of how did every step go. And so, no, I think we need more careful fading and reinforcement and steps like that to specify to have success usually. I think the other interesting thing about this is the training and the probe was really different. They were trained in a room one-on-one just with cards of out of context, but then the probe was done in context, and it's can you apply this skill now? And I don't think they targeted mumbling or terminations per se in the training. But
yeah,
then
they didn't really. You're right.
So it was really this mismatch that was neat that they got such great results, but it's how did they get
maybe
those?
it was an incompatible response with initiating conversation.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, mumbling for sure. Right. It seemed to this kind of broad overall better social skills that the outcome that they had from teaching them this 7-step rule process. Yeah.
Okay, so there's more to it. It's not always this simple. So perhaps is that everyone feel good about segging into our next article?
Wait, I do want to add one more thing to this article. Just like I told you.
Wait,
did you problem solve that? You're like, Rob is switching topics.
Right, I was like, okay.
I could let him.
I could
yell
stop.
really loudly.
I did want to say that they did a social validity questionnaire here with the coworkers to see if this was an effective treatment. And they had 7 scales where they looked at physical appearance, being social at break, being social at workplace, and they found that for all the participants, coworkers thought that they did better at the post-test than at the pre-test, with the exception of physical appearance for one of our participants, which is funny because I don't think they even really assessed that.
Targeted that.
Right.
Yeah.
Physical appearance, like you looked better.
Yeah.
So
it's a weird one.
it is, and I'm wondering if they included it because even if like my hair is messy one day, people may not notice it because I'm so nice. Right, so I'm wondering if that. I mean, I'm thinking about it.
Did the other
They
skills
weren't a beauty school,
Right.
though.
Beauty school. Good
Yeah,
for
it's
them.
true.
Maybe
So I
they're
don't know.
hyper aware.
That's right.
That's true.
They did mention that one of them engaged in some type of hand mannerism. So is that what they were?
Oh, on her
Yeah,
break, she
dressing.
went
Maybe.
around and-
Maybe.
But I just found that was a physical appearance,
Yeah,
except
yeah.
for one.
Right,
She was still ugly in the post test.
Maybe it was clothing.
Yeah, I think it was too. But
That's your Likert scale.
Right.
1 ago.
7. Dream. Okay, now you can move on.
Okay. All right. Well, this seems like a good place that we should take a quick minute and have a little break. We'll be right back with more discussion on problem solving.
Hey, ABA Inside Trackers. Are you interested in being a behavior analyst and you're not yet? If so, I really would recommend looking into the Regis College Masters in Science and Applied Behavior Analysis program. Our 2016 pass rates for first-time test takers of the BCBA exam was 90%. We think this is a true testament to our program. In addition, we're going to be starting an on-campus autism center in the summer of 2017. This is going to allow our graduate students on-hands learning right at our college And you will receive partial tuition remission if you work at the center, which is pretty amazing. We also offer paid clinical placements and graduate assistantships starting in our students' first year, where all of our grad students are working in the field either part-time or full-time. I find you that job. That is part of my job. We also are approved by the BACB to provide intensive practicum, so students will complete 750 hours of an intensive practicum across their time at Regis. All of our faculty are PhD-level BCBAs with strong applied and research backgrounds in ABA, and all have published papers in respected peer-reviewed journals. We ensure small class sizes so that all students receive personalized attention from their professors and advisors, are easily accessible to meet with students. Two more really great things that I want to highlight about the Regis program is that we host an invited lecture series at Regis each year, which involves inviting outside experts in ABA to speak on specialized topics relating to practicing ABA. Last summer, we completed an international service trip to Iceland. This trip enabled students to learn more about providing culturally competent care to diverse populations. Students and alums worked with children diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder and provided parent and teacher trainings for 11 days. This service trip occurs every other year, and the next trip will be in the summer of 2018. And finally, we have a great location. We're just 12 miles from the center of Boston. We currently have rolling admission. We're accepting students until we reach capacity for the fall of 2017. Please check us out at www.regiscollege.edu.
Okay, and we are back with more discussion with Dr. Judah Axe on problem solving. All right, so now we will do that little thing and move on to training preschool children to use visual imagining in their complex categorization tasks. But before we fully move on, I've problem solved that if you're listening to this show for continuing education credits, you're going to want to know one of our 2 secret code words that you have to send us to prove that you've listened to every word with rapt attention. And that first secret code word is flower. 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 The ones you smell and that are blooming all around us if you are in a place in the planet that is having spring right now. If you're not, then you might not have any flowers.
If you're from a different planet, you may not have spring on your planet. But
our
it is
Martian
the most
listeners
beautiful
have
season
no flowers.
with many flowers.
All right. Flower. And let's talk about visual imagining. I have a hard time with that. There's too many
Imagine a
names.
world where preschool children need to learn how to imagine things. That world is found at Western Michigan University.
By the way, I'm actually rewatching all the Twilight Zone episodes. In the first season, they don't have that song.
Huh.
It comes later on.
Really?
Yeah. I think it's the 4th season.
So isn't that long? Come up with that song?
I guess.
Was there a different song?
Nope.
No song?
It just goes,
Yep.
You're entering the Twilight Zone.
Oh,
Gah!
just a gong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it shows a fake sky with some stars.
Maybe they
It's all
thought
about
not enough
science.
people are watching. We need
Right.
a little
Yeah.
luring, scary theme.
It's all about space and space travel because that's what was going on at the time. Matt and I looked it up for historical reference.
Nice.
But anyway,
This study had 4 participants who were all typically developing children aged 4 and 5 years.
that's my favorite age group.
Yeah?
Yep.
Do you ever ask children in that age group to tell you some things in the kitchen?
I haven't, no. I'm always like, let's go do fun things. And they're like, yay. And I'm like, great.
Tell me some fun things you'd like to do.
No, I'm always like, we're doing what I want to do. Maybe I should next time ask them things. Because they can't do it?
No, it turns out that they cannot. Not
Interesting.
if you just generally give them those types of categories, like really broad. Like, tell me some things. Tell me some animals.
Too bad Finn's sleeping. We could have him come out here.
I could wake him up real quick. Want me to get him out here?
Kind
So we can
of.
grill him about.
Do you want to?
Tell me some ocean animal.
Yeah.
He's awake if
awake.
you want.
Oh, let's bring him out. This is funny.
Hey, Finn!
He'll be so jazzed.
Bring out contestant number 1.
Finn, come here.
What are the categories? Animals, kitchens, vehicles, and furniture? Seems like
He's
kids
gonna
can
win.
be able to do this.
He probably will, because he's our child. He's just a genius.
No, I just...
Here, I've got them all up.
Finn!
So that's the general question, right? Tell me some animals.
Tell me some.
Or tell me
Farm
some
animals.
farm animals.
No. Animals.
Tell me some animals.
Do you want me
Then
to
you go
record
like
this?
Yeah.
farm.
Finn,
cow,
come here for a
sheep,
minute.
Ocean.
I'm gonna have you be on the show for a minute.
question.
Hello.
Oh,
Come on. Jackie says she doesn't know if you can answer a question, but we think it's a pretty good question for you.
You're too old. You're too old, Owen.
Only you can do it. Owen's too old. We need someone who's 5, a special 5-year-old.
Okay.
Oh, you sure?
Sorry. This is the one time you always want to be on the
I
show.
know. You sure, buddy?
All right.
Why don't you ask the question? Ask the question.
I was
and
gonna
if
ask
like
you. Just tell me some animals. Okay.
Fine.
That's
Go to
fine.
bed.
Well, then come
Come
on.
over here. Use a microphone.
Come here.
You can talk on my microphone.
Come on over, bud.
I'm Judah, by the way.
This is our guest Judah.
Hello.
And now you can tell Owen what he looks like. Because that was what Owen wanted to know.
All right. So I'm gonna ask you some questions. Okay. All right. So tell me some animals.
Cow,
What are some other animals?
bull,
What are some other animals?
monkey,
How about what are some furniture items?
chair,
Anything else?
kitchen,
Kitchen. Okay. Any other furniture items?
bookshelf,
What about some kitchen items?
spoon,
Anything else?
knife,
What about some vehicles?
monster truck,
Monster truck? Oh, that's a good one. Any other vehicles?
car,
Anything else?
race car,
Cool. Thanks.
Thanks, my bad.
Too cool for school.
I don't know how much you picked up this grumpy audio.
Yeah. Monster truck.
That was good.
I like furniture. Kitchen.
Yeah.
He
yeah,
visualized
yeah,
bookshelf when he looked at the bookshelf.
Right. Oh, that's true.
Yeah. That's good. Man. That's right. I forgot. Before he left, we should have asked him, how'd you know that? How'd you come up
Yeah.
with those?
Oh, man.
We
That's
could
a-
get him back here. I'm
Yeah,
sure
I
he'll
asked-
really love
I
that.
asked my
He's all
3-year-old that when said, this goes ahead to the thing I'm working on, what'd you do at school today? She said, we went for a walk. I'm like, how'd you know that? What'd you do to get there? What precurrent behavior did you engage in?
What did she say?
She's like, I want to go play.
This is awesome. It was funny. She's like, well, Dad, my synapses.
She looked in her mind file,
Yeah.
Jackie.
That makes me really mad when people talk about mind files. My husband brought it up once,
Yeah.
and we got into a fight for like 2 days. I didn't talk to him for
He
2
has
whole
them?
days. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He's a little homunculus in there.
He did.
Boy.
He did, not
He doesn't
anymore.
You
You clean those files.
Out of
Yeah,
him.
this. I literally, he was like gonna kiss me, and I was like, no, and I like
Not
slammed the
till
door.
you recycle those mind files.
Yeah. Put those in the bin. Okay.
So that's what baseline looked like in the study, guys.
Oh, nice.
Yep. Jackie pretty much just ran it. They said, tell me some animals, tell me some things in the kitchen, tell me some vehicles. And then for one participant, they added, or I'm sorry, 2, they added in the furniture category as well. If the children did not list at least 6 items
He
in
did not.
baseline, then they moved on to training. So
He also was very grumpy, so
That's true.
What did they do if the kids were grumpy in the study?
try to get him
know.
tomorrow.
I'm not sure if there is an added reinforcer component
Yeah.
here or not, or if it was just social.
Maybe a DRO for grumpiness.
Yes, perhaps. Maybe we should try that too for his grumpiness.
I think the confound of when your parents and close friends ask you questions at nighttime, it's just
Right.
usually not
Yeah.
the
You
best
know, it
result.
was yeah. He would probably
Don't
have
do
done
your
that
research at
school.
night before the kids go to bed.
Did they interrupt Fuller House to do the sessions during the study?
Yeah, they may have. So that was what they were looking at here was could kids, based on just given a loose categorical term, draw up more than 6 items
Right.
that fit into that category. And I guess maybe less surprising to me now, 4 and 5-year-olds can't generally do that
Right.
without some additional type of prompting.
I was prompting too because I was saying, "What else?
Yeah.
What else?"
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Yeah, and I think they did that in here.
Yeah, there was like a criteria of a couple seconds they could say, like,
Yeah.
tell more or anything else or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it turns out this isn't a skill that is even that easy to teach, let alone be present independently. So they wanted to go about figuring out how could they teach children to independently produce more items in each of these categories, and the technique that they were looking at using specifically was visual imagining, not visual imaging. So I think that's where you like do 3D printing or
Yeah. I think the little background too on this skill is a lot of times when we target this with kids, tell me some animals, and you get kind of what Finn started with, cow, and then they're done, right?
Yeah.
And they want to get 12 or so. They want to get a lot. Tell me some animals. That's like, how many is some? You know, a lot. You get a lot. Yeah.
And across different categories too. So
Different types.
right,
yeah,
different
yeah.
types of animals. So not just all farm animals, but farm animals, ocean animals, variety.
It does seem hard to do. Just produce
Yeah.
that much responding.
I could do
without-
it though.
I kind of with him.
Can
I
you
wanna-
tell me
I
animals?
I
Jack?
wanted to be like, tell me 12 animals.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, I'll count. Go. You know, that might
He
have
might have
gotten
done
him to
it.
do
Yeah.
more. Right?
That's
He
true.
probably
You're right.
could have done. Yeah.
So maybe the directions in which we give, because some
Expectations.
could be one.
So this fits into the category of problem solving because most 4 or 5-year-olds have these words in their repertoire, right? They've used them in the past.
Yeah, they could label 12 pictures of
Right.
animals.
But when asked to pull that up from their mind file,
Yeah.
they are not doing it in
Yep.
this particular context. And that, as you were describing, is they're now in a state of deprivation, or is that what you had said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe mixed with aversive stimulation.
okay,
The
that was it.
teacher
Yeah.
is, asking me to do something, and part I want to get a reinforcer that's maybe available for saying a bunch, and I want her to stop asking me. Yeah.
Part I want to go back and watch Fuller
Fuller
House.
House.
Yeah.
That's right.
Right?
What do I got to do to go back? Yep.
So a lot of potential contingencies in place there. But what we really want is to be able to produce more categorical terms.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So they started in on teaching towards this goal, and the study went through several different phases of teaching this end goal here. So
I think one neat thing about all of the problem solving literature is the researchers never taught the ultimate response, right? It's always teaching those precurrent behaviors, teaching other behaviors that when I emit those, then I come up with the ultimate response, which is neat. So they tried a bunch of ways of doing that here. Yep.
yeah, I really liked how they broke down what you're terming the precurrent responses. And when we talk about these types of topics that are really big topics for behavior analysis, I love how it always breaks down into things that we can observationally define and measure. So like you were saying before, precurrent behavior doesn't necessarily carry a lot of meaning and maybe isn't the most parsimonious term, but the Kaisermore study does break it down, and they list 3 specifically that they were looking to teach and train, which was grouping items, using visual imagining, and then observing the environment. And when you break it down in that way, those are all things that we can observe and teach.
Right.
And if we were to talk about how we typically problem solve, then those are the types of things that we do describe.
Yep. I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not something that's so mysterious. We can't do.
I think the hard part is that we do that. If I ask you, tell me some animals, you may engage in that grouping, ordering, reordering, structuring covertly. Right? You will. I don't. I mean, when we're faced with a hard problem, let's build a house. Let's do something I've never done. We'll probably draw it out also, so it's at the overt level. Just think it up.
Just gonna go buy some wood,
Right. Yeah. So
maybe some nails.
There's a level at which, like when I'm designing a study, say that's a problem. How am I going to design a study? I like to draw it out. Like, what's it going to look like? What are the graphs going to look like? rather than just picture it in my head, visually imagine what it's going to look like and talk about it. So, yeah, I think we can talk about all of it at the overt level, observable level, and then it sinks down to the covert level. Doing math problems, that happens. We learn to do them out loud or, observably.
It's all behavior.
It's all behavior, yes.
So
yes.
while you guys were talking, I was wondering, do you think it always has to start overtly? So as we were talking with problem solving, so you're saying, first off, everyone does it out loud, so you can see some observable behavior, and then once maybe you can say more fluently, you're engaging in the behavior more fluently, then it becomes more covert. Do you think it ever reverses? Starts off more covertly and then comes up, I guess?
Yeah.
Regurgitates into overt behavior?
It's a deep
Do you
question.
think things you do, problems you solve, go back and forth over covert?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I can't pinpoint one that
Yeah.
I haven't overtly practiced.
My wife says to me yesterday, go to CVS, get medicine and baby wipes and diapers and Kool-Aid. No, we don't drink Kool-Aid.
Tang.
Tang. Kit Kats. We don't get a whole list of things. And I'm like rehearsing it in my head. Okay, got it. Wait, hang on. Well, let me go through it again. Make sure I got it, right? And you say it out loud. So things like that, remembering, recalling, that's behavior we engage in. We say it, remember medicine wipes diapers to ourselves, but often, well, let me check. Is this right? So we bring it back out to the overt.
That's a good example. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's good to bring that up, that it's not always covert to overt.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That
Right.
That it can go both ways.
In the Sauter et al. Study, which was these two seemed like they were done at the same time. Maybe Sauter came out just before this one. They referred to it, but in that publication, they've got these great graphs of these self-prompting behaviors, and so of using your strategy, of using the skill. So here they alluded to it would be like, okay, I see the scene, I see a cow. And they recorded those self-prompts and showed that they decreased in level, suggesting that they were going from the overt to the covert level of the self-prompts.
That's awesome.
It was a neat demonstration of that.
That's cool.
Cool. Okay. Sorry for interrupting you, Diana.
Oh, no. You're fine. Do you remember the Sesame Street sketch where the little girl was going to the store and she said,
Oh, yeah.
a loaf of bread, a container of milk, and a stick of butter?
And a stick of butter. I love bread, a container of milk, and a stick of butter. I do remember that.
That's one of my favorites.
That's an old one.
Yeah. It is. It's classic. Okay. So to talk through the procedures for Kaisermore et al., like I said, they had 4 participants that they were looking to teach how to respond to these categorical cues with 12 different items in the categories. And within each category, there were subcategories as well that they were looking for answers into. So it was tell me some animals, but they were looking for animals that lived on the farm, the ocean, and in the zoo.
True.
Or the jungle, because, animals aren't from the zoo, but they said zoo, but
Pretty
anyway,
common preschool
fine.
categorizations.
Curriculum.
It's not the farm, it's the zoo.
Zoo/jungle.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough. All right.
Non-domesticated animals, to be more specific.
You don't want these as pets.
Yeah. I kind of do. Monkey.
Well,
But anyway.
can you put overalls on him? That's the... Because
Yeah.
if yes, then yes.
Okay,
Monkey can be a pet. All right, so first of all, they did some Tack training just to ensure that the students were familiar with all of the terms. So they had them put them into a picture scene, right? So there was if you remember, there were animals, kitchen, furniture, and vehicles. Yes, so there were background scenes for each of these, and they had them place the pictures into the correct category. And then from there, they went on to do subcategory interverbal training. So in this part, they added some additional cues for the participants, such as what are some places that animals go? And the intention here being that this would be another cue for them to think about a farm or an ocean or a zoo. in order to produce the responses that they were looking for. So that was the first training category. The next phase was multiple tact training. So for multiple tact training, they were teaching them 2 ways to respond to each of the pictures. So, for example, they would first ask, what is it? And it would be a sheep. And then they would say, and the sheep lives on the farm, as well as,
It's an
what is
animal.
it? And it's
So,
an animal.
Yeah,
Oh, my God.
Right, the category. So they'd show a sheep and say, what is it? It's a sheep, and it goes on the farm. And then the other type was, what is it? It lives on the farm, and it's an animal.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so that was multiple tact training. There were many acronyms in this study, by the way. So there's
Yes,
IVT,
yes.
MTT, and next up we're going to learn about VIT,
Yes.
which,
Yeah, you
I
know
was
me.
getting ready for VIP, but we're not there yet. That's right.
right, so with VIT, which was Visual Imagining Training, this one got mentioned in the title, so you know that it's probably an important component. They gave the child a picture of the scene, so let's say the animal scene, the farm scene, and they had the child look at the picture of the scene. It was presented on a PowerPoint.
Yeah.
So they initially had the picture present, and then they faded the picture to gray.
This is maybe my favorite part is they showed the farm, for example, and then the experimenter said, okay, I'm going to close my eyes. And she closed her eyes. And when she did, the screen went gray to show what it looks like when you close your eyes.
It does look gray.
Does
with
it look
little
gray?
dots
Does yours
of
look
colors.
gray?
Yeah,
Some people say black. And
mine's gray with like where the light was before.
sometimes if you're on the beach, it looks kind of orange.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
For those ocean animals.
That's a really fun way to present that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah? Okay,
right.
so the experimenter closed her eyes. They made the screen go gray, sort of to represent that. And the experimenter would say, I see a sheep, let's say. And then that item would appear on the PowerPoint screen. So the child could see what the experimenter is narrating as far as what her covert behavior is, we can assume.
So neat.
Yeah.
Like, who thought about that?
Yeah.
I know, it's a really, really cool idea
Right.
and way to do
Yeah.
it. So then the experimenter would say, okay, now it's your turn. You close your eyes, imagine the place, and what do you see? And then that would be the prompt for the child to then hopefully tact what they were seeing. And then they worked on fading out that PowerPoint prompt of having the screen present. So initially it was there for 10 seconds. They faded it back to 5, made the screen black, and then removed it. So that was the visual imagining training that they did. And then from there, they tweaked that a little bit by adding another condition in which there was a visual imagining with prompts. So that was identical to the visual imagining, except that they added the prompt. Remember, you can imagine, which really just served as a prompt for the child to reflect back on what they had learned previously. And then finally, there was one more condition, which was a visual imagining with prompts, and they added a rule. And the rule, with the rule, the child before the session needed to state the rule, which was, I can imagine places and say what I see.
I want my kid to say that every day. Like, to wake up and just say that. Like, remember,
I can imagine places.
I can imagine places and say what I see. It's like reading Rainbow, right? You can go anywhere.
Yeah.
If you get a book in front of you, you actually imagine anything. It's just right
Right.
there.
Yeah.
Actually, it reminds me, I went to the conference of the Council for Exceptional Children 2 weeks
Oh,
ago, which is the
fun.
big
Mhm.
special education conference. And one of my former special ed students from Simmons was on a presentation. Her advisor from University of Texas was presenting about motivational strategies to improve reading of elementary age students with learning disabilities. And I was intrigued. And she called it a cognitive strategy, but you could easily analyze it in terms of problem solving. But it really was saying positive statements about yourself, about the task. I can do this. I'm good. I know how to do this. Go me. And teaching the kids to do that amongst a bunch of other steps. But that was the crux. Improve their reading scores.
I agree. I believe it. I do that with myself while I'm driving to work every day.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm going to rock this day.
go,
like,
girl.
this day does not get anything on me. And I do it
That's
every
right,
day.
That's right. Yeah.
That's why I'm so cheery, everyone.
Yeah, I
that
think
knows me.
We do that hard, stressful situations. You got this, right. But they showed that with a grant-funded
Wow,
study and all
that's
this.
nice.
That it worked with a lot of kids, group design.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
They did a TED Talk on that too.
Yes, that's what
You
I
read
told.
that, right?
I watched it.
Oh yeah.
But so I said to the author afterwards, the presenter, I was like, "There's a TED Talk I saw on this." Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. About Harvard
stance.
Law School, Harvard
Yeah.
Business School.
You make
yeah,
the-
the
Oh,
stance.
the power
yeah.
stance.
Power
Yeah.
stance. The power
Mhm.
stance makes you more confident.
That's right.
Wow.
She's like, I'm a professor at Harvard Business School. I should not be here. I'm not qualified for this, but I stood strong.
Yep.
Right? And you do it, you go, and
Mhm.
yeah.
That's so neat, though.
Yeah.
So anyway, what happened? Do you think?
Yeah. Did
What do
any
I
of
think?
Did any of this work?
They all got into Harvard Business School because the power stance didn't imagine it.
I'm just going to give a quick summary, I think, of these results. So the participants were, I don't think I even told you their names, did I? It was Brian, Jeb, Jonathan, and Annette.
I love that name, Annette.
Annette
I do too.
from the Mickey Mouse Club.
Annette Funicello.
Annette.
Results were pretty similar for the first three participants in that we did not see independent correct responding for these naming items in the categories until they were taught the visual imagining. That was true for Brian, that was true for Jeb, and that was true for Jonathan, with a little bit of variability for him. For Annette, however, we did not see the same results.
Nope.
She had more difficulty with this task, even when adding in, making modifications to the visual imagining and adding in the rule, etc. It was definitely a successful intervention for the first three participants. And what you don't know here is, were they really doing this? Are they really imagining something?
Mhm.
Because it's not a behavior that we can all see. However, they mentioned that for the first three participants, they were giving some clues that that is what they were doing, because they would, either close their eyes or talk about what they had learned when they looked at the whole scene together, and they would say, "Oh, I remember that this was, underneath the airplane."
I like that part. I like those like little tidbits.
Yeah. So they were pretty sure that that's what they were doing, but for Annette, they weren't sure if she was using this strategy at all, or if the type of language that you need in order to do this type of imagining or follow these rules was really there for her. So it was a little bit less successful, but overall it was really neat intervention
Yes.
that they did.
Indeed.
What's your favorite part of this study?
Can I talk about these other graphs here?
Yeah.
They're funny and strange and different looking,
Yeah.
but really neat, even neater than the neat part. The authors included these bar graphs that tried to show further evidence that there was covert problem solving going on, visual imagining, and that they were using the strategy in some way. And so they graphed especially in the sessions where they were emitting a lot of responses to tell me some category, the order in which they said each item. And they found, by and large, that they clustered their answers according to the subcategories. So, for example, here's one for Brian, who in session 18 emitted 12 animals, and they show in the graph the order. So he first said 4 farm animals, then he said 4 ocean animals, then he said 4 zoo animals. So even though we can't tell if he's visually imagining, we see that he's evidence that he's using the strategy, because he's saying those 12 animals in the order of first farm animals, then ocean animals, then zoo animals. Pretty neat. And they graphed that across the participants and showed those pretty consistent results. And the order wasn't the same every time. So for that example, I just said farm, ocean, zoo, but in other sessions it was zoo, ocean, farm, or something like that.
It's interesting too when you look at Jeb and Brian. If you go to the last session, I always like to look at those last sessions to see how behavior changed over sessions. Is that for the most part, those last 2 sessions for Brian and Jeb, they're exclusively clumped together, right? So they're in some of the earlier ones, they may say a lot of farm, and then maybe there's one color, and then a more of another color chunked together. But with these, the last sessions are pretty exclusively within those groups.
Yeah.
Which is pretty neat. And the same happens for Jonathan as well. maybe as sessions moved on, the group solidified for them.
Yep. Yep.
That's such
Yeah.
a smart way to
Very
try to
smart.
get at that question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of what's happening covertly.
Yeah. Hard to think how they came up with it, but
Yeah.
I bet it was something along the lines of what I did with my co-author student I'm working with when we thought about the problems we were addressing is ask everyday people these problems to solve these problems. So how'd you do it? They said, well, close my eye, I pictured something and said, okay, picturing, visual imagining, how could we break that down to this skill? But it was pretty ingenious the way they did it.
So, Judah, what are your thoughts on new math?
New math?
Yeah. They changed all the
Like
math.
the number bonds?
Okay. I know, I've heard that educators have changed the way we teach math.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the specifics. I know how I learn math.
I know how I learned
Right.
math too, and it's different than how they do
Yeah.
math now.
Like long division, is that an example?
I
don't know.
don't
What's
know.
an example?
I'm only up to third grade math.
Right.
Then are you thinking in terms of the where they do word problems now, where they try to do a lot more with drawing pictures, and they have these bar models that they use, or more the kind of the number bonds? So you've got
The
10,
number bonds.
and you've got these the molecules you might have in chemistry.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
10, and there's like a 5 and a 5, or a 7 and a 3.
They're like, how do you make this number? Like, I think what I'm trying to say is a common example, and maybe I'm wrong, but I would have learned to do subtraction by taking a 2-digit number, stacking on top of a smaller 2-digit number, putting a minus sign next to it, and carrying the 10 over and doing my subtraction, right? And then you get the answer. And what they're teaching kids now is, okay, you're trying to subtract 45 from 57. Well, 57 rounds up to 60, and I know that 45 is 15 less than 60, but 57 is 3 less than 60,
Yeah.
so the answer is 12.
Oh, interesting.
Did I do that
Interesting.
right?
I think so.
Okay,
I definitely got the gist
Okay.
because when I was doing subtraction when I was a boy, I did exactly how you said. And my dad would say this new way.
Oh.
He'd be like, just estimate round. And
Yeah.
and so he pushed me to do that, which, so that's how kids are being taught now. You're
Yes.
saying.
Your
Yeah.
dad's
Yeah.
revolutionary.
He was
I
ahead
guess
of his
so.
time.
I guess so.
And there's a lot of resistance to it from parents of our generation because that's not how we were taught.
Right.
And so I initially was resistant to it, but then the more I thought about it, I said, well, that really is how you problem solve in
Yeah,
everyday life.
yeah,
You don't
yeah,
get
yeah,
out your
yeah.
pen and paper and carry the one.
That's right.
You do it that way. You group it together and you estimate, and then you
Yeah.
find the answer.
I guess I think of two goals or two reasons to do math. One is what you do in school, and I think what engineers or physicists or something would do is I want to know the exact calculation, no estimating, no rounding, exact calculation, and know how to do that and do that carefully. And then the other one is everyday chat about numbers, budgets, something. You don't have to be so precise. It's like, give me the general ballpark. We talk 1,000, 100,000, And so I think for everyday conversation, it seems that method, it allows you to calculate faster without, hang on, let me get out my pencil and paper,
Yeah. And I think they claim that it gets more at number sense
Yeah.
and
yeah.
organization for kids versus just teaching them the rules to
I
follow.
could see that. Yeah, I was good at math. I love math, but
Me too.
yeah, and I loved knowing how to calculate something and doing it on
Yeah.
paper. But right, the everyday chat of what's this mean? Is it 60? Is it 160? I didn't have that broader sense as much, and so pushing in that direction. Yeah, I guess I could see.
I feel like it fits into this discussion.
Yeah,
Of what are
yeah.
we teaching to the minute level, or are we trying to teach
Right.
how to solve a problem?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Which would be a good skill for kids to have.
And they're both. I guess to me, they're both solving problem, right? Just different way of doing it. What's maybe the faster result? And the number sense idea, I like that. 57 is close to 60. 60 is a more whole number you can play with. I like that. I don't know which would produce better results.
Research.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It makes me think at least more than two, but two articles in the 2000s by Nancy Neef and colleagues were about solving word problems, math word problems, and using that problem solving analysis
Oh, cool.
to solve those. So put a plug in.
I'm
for
gonna go look those up.
Yeah.
Cool,
A
thanks.
nifty strategy they used.
So Judah, what are you guys currently working on?
Student Stephanie Phelan and I, Stephanie wanted to evaluate problem solving, and she wanted to specifically address the problem of teaching kids to recall past events. So the ultimate hard. The ultimate is tell me about what you did on the weekend or something like that. And a lot of kids without disabilities, right? It's played or nothing, or you
I
get
can't remember.
I can't remember. And so we designed an intervention that combined these two strategies in these two articles. So the setup was that kids would come to a social skills group, and it was a 2-hour social skills group. At the beginning, when they got there, they went into the elephant room, we called it. It was a little elephant on the door, and they did a 5-minute activity with a therapist, different activity every session. Play a board game, do an arts project, something like that. And they would take a selfie. So they took a picture of themselves doing the activity.
That's fun.
Yep. Then the kids would do their 2-hour social skills group, unrelated to the study. And at the end of the 2 hours, go into a separate room and ask them, tell me what you did in the elephant room. And that was the probe. That was what happened in baseline and in probe sessions later on. And the intervention was show the selfie, show the picture, and say, look at the picture and close your eyes and see the elephant room. And now ask yourself and answer 7 questions, which was, who was there? What was there? What's one thing that happened? What's another thing that happened? What's a third thing that happened? How did I feel? How did Rob feel? Therapist feel? And so prompt fading of those steps and
So
fading out the picture.
Similar to the 7 steps, but not quite. I like that.
Yeah, it was, directly use those two strategies, but different setup. So we started with multiple baseline across participants. Design. 2 kids had to leave, very unfortunately. 1 made it all the way through and went to generalization probes with their mom, asking them in a different location of what'd you do, and getting 7 words. An important part of it was that to count as a accurate statement, and so we measured the frequency of statements, responses to the question. It had to be a phrase with a subject and a verb.
Sweet.
So we played shoots and ladders, but just played, didn't cut it.
Right. I like that, because then they could just spout at anything, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it was hard. It was stringent.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So kids would be like, I told you, shoots and ladders, come on. But it was like, we played shoots and ladders, right? So, and then Stephanie's working on a study too, which we're trying to do multiple based on across questions. So teaching the first 2 questions at first, and then the next 3 questions, and that kind of setup.
I like that.
Thanks.
Sounds fun. I can't wait to see more of it.
Yeah.
So I think we're about to wrap up, but before we do that, I want to make sure we enter Dissemination Station. I have a question, though, for everyone. Judah, as our guest, maybe you'd like to answer first. Can you make some vehicle sounds? Jackie, do you have a vehicle sound that you can make?
You know I do.
And Diana, I don't want to leave you out. Do you have a vehicle sound?
It's a fast train.
Wow,
As a helicopter.
Oh.
we all got to Dissemination Station shaking a different mode of transportation. I like that. I'll put this in the sound bank for next time.
Bloopers.
So, given these sort of 2 examples of problem solving, and then talking a little bit about the research that you and your students are working on, Judah, what would you say for practitioners or folks who are interested in this topic? What do we know about problem solving, and what is there still to tease out?
Yeah, great question. I think some of the topics that we looked at here, social skills. I mentioned there's some studies with math. That's a straightforward comment on application of problem solving. I think my students have tried to problem solve about problem solving, or brainstorm how else could we address this. And one thing we looked at is the common core of just skills that we need to teach kids. Could we apply problem solving? And there's a lot. Other areas of math, certainly being able to count on a number line or things like that. If you visually imagine the number line, that might help. I think it's pretty endless, the strategies that we could target. I'm curious what you all think of other skills that we teach kids. That
Job
we
skills, vocational skills are super important.
Yep.
I think actually completing jobs, like when to empty a trash can, when not to empty a trash can, when to stand at the register, when not to stand at the register, right? Because if you have I know that I've been to many stores where there's just someone standing at the register.
Yeah.
Nobody's around, right? And there's a whole lot of other stuff that could be happening, but they're just standing there. Yeah. Or I've also seen people just empty trash cans, which seems redundant.
Yeah,
right.
Right. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so maybe using these problem-solving strategies to make work performance more efficient.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's endless. I know colleagues who are working on teaching problem solving to behavior analysts. We have to solve problems too, right?
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of them. And we've got some problem solving strategies, but we could maybe be sharper, more careful about how we do that, more efficient, challenging behavior, communication skills, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
We love a good decision tree.
We sure
here.
do. I was thinking about that. Yeah.
I know. I like the idea of, we've got our 7 steps. We've got our visualization tasks. What are the commonalities that, you should always start with these 4 are the most important of the 7 steps, and these visualizations are the most important visualizations. Is there a sort of an overarching problem solving set of steps that you always want to take those into account no matter the problem? It's math, it's farm animals, it's social skills, it's vocational skills. You always want to have those in there, and then these are the ones that are going to vary based on the type of skill. I'd be curious about that, but that's sort of me. I like to have rules, because I know I do use those 7, I'm in this social situation. I'm supposed to be networking. I could just keep talking to the 2 people I know, or I could pass out my business card.
That's right. Absolutely.
I choose A.
I choose go home.
That's right. Sure.
I choose C.
I'll feel great because I'll be doing something way more fun than
talk to everyone in the room.
Right. Share 2 more. I think reading comprehension is a big one. That was my problem as a kid. I was not good at reading comprehension, and so I think an interesting part of this is that there's studies out there that teach problem solving but don't call it that,
Yeah.
And so things like graphic organizers are a big one for reading comprehension. We could probably analyze that as problem solving and be more careful with targeting that with kids with disabilities. And I just have to share one other published study, also by Nancy Neef as an author, which was about manding. And so the problem that they addressed was when a kid uses PECs to communicate, and you have an EO for something as a reinforcer, but you've got no icon in your book.
I read this article. It's a great one.
It's a great one,
yeah.
right? And so they taught the kids. They had different shapes, colors, function, icons. And so if you wanted a DVD, for example, but didn't have a DVD icon, you would take silver circle. I want silver circle, right?
Yeah.
And if you wanted sausage, I want brown rectangle or something like that. And so that was a different, categorize that as, well, they talked about as improvisation. You have to improvise, right? And I think about it also as recombining minimal units, that you've got these units that you've learned in the past. Now you've got to recombine them in this novel situation, which I think is really smart also, and a neat application of it.
That's excellent.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, as I'm thinking about it, my topic of research interest is observational learning, and you could probably categorize that as problem solving as well, right? Because you're responding differentially in the presence of different consequences.
Solve social problems like, what's Jackie doing? Oh, that's what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, right. It's like, what's Jackie doing? Don't do that.
Oh, there's the skill we always want to teach. Like, what do you do if you don't know what to do? Look around at your friends. What are they doing?
That's right. Yeah. So I think it's a neat area because it is endless, I think, the ways we could apply it. And I think we should apply it more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's one that everyone kind of has a sense of what problem solving is, but do they really understand what problem solving is? Do they understand those components of behavior? And if you don't, like the example of the graphic organizers you had, Judah, that's a great one. I would love to see some real research on them, because every classroom I've ever been in, there's always a graphic organizer. It's always a different graphic organizer.
Is a graphic organizer where you're like, first in this rectangle write your intro, and then next in this rectangle?
That'd be one example.
Or is it like a trapper keeper?
The former. The former. I mean, I suppose the trapper keeper could have some sort of component
graphic
to it.
organizer, I hear it and I see it, I visualize.
Yeah.
in my mind's eye a trapper keeper. But it's the other thing, right? It's the first thing I
Yes.
described. Okay.
But I've seen ones that are, they're the piece of paper. I've seen ones that they're tactile. So you've got like the star means do this, and then the heart means do that. I've seen lots of different kinds. Is there a benefit to any of them? Do any of them sort of tap into those steps of problem solving, or are better for imaging or imagining? Or
That's a hard
is it
word for you
individualization?
today.
I'm really not able to say that
Yeah.
word. I'm very I've got to imagine in it.
Yeah.
So I just like to see that
Yeah.
graphic organizer, especially because writing I think is one of the hardest
Yeah.
areas for almost every student.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one other reason I like this topic is, to me, it's all about programming for generalization. Also, I think problem solving could be thought of as a way to program for generalization.
Absolutely, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's always about how do you prepare someone for that novel situation you've never been in before, and now you have to apply skills that you've used in the past to tackle those problems in the current situations.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that sounds like what all those 21st century skills. We've got to teach the kids the job that doesn't exist from 30 years from now. Well, after you teach them these basic units of problem solving, they'll figure it out. Let's hope.
Right.
Well, Judith, thanks so much for coming on the show. It was a real treat to have you here.
No, thank you all for having me. It's really fun. I've listened to the show before. It's great to be part of it. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
We
Great.
appreciate it.
And for those of you listening, thank you so much. And you might want to know our second secret code word, and it is vanilla. VINILLA.
Mm-hmm.
If you're from this area, you might say vanilla, but it's vanilla. The
That's
flavor.
funny.
I should nerdily mention that the most recent problem-solving study in ABA I know about is about spelling.
Oh.
Nice.
Nerded out. I was gonna nerd out to the 80s and talk about Vanilla Ice.
That's
but
what I was wondering. Is that why we chose
Do
this?
it now. Do it
yeah,
now.
that's what that was. Cause
If you got a problem,
I'll solve it.
check out my hook.
Well, my DJ
Revolves
revolves it. So I always say dissolves it, but I know that's wrong. It's revolve it.
That would be
Revolves it.
poor
Yeah.
problem solving of your DJs.
Right?
I could
Yo,
dissolve
my
this
DJ
record.
dissolves it.
Your silver circle.
Yeah, my silver circle is dissolved.
I didn't go back that far, but with Spotify, I played "Whoomp There It Is" for my daughter today.
Oh, how'd you like it?
She liked it. She
Oh,
was dancing.
good.
Actually, my 9-month-old was like trying to crawl to it. I was
Nice.
trying to motivate her.
Good to know. That's funny.
Oh boy. So we got to do our plugs. I got to problem solve through the end of this show like I do. I forget every time. So thank you so much for listening, and thanks Jackie and Judah and Diana all for being here.
Thanks, Rob.
We hope you all
Thanks, Rob.
enjoyed our show. If you did so, please feel free to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Google Play or Stitcher, wherever you listen to the show. You can subscribe to us there as well. You can check us out on Facebook and on Twitter. We're pretty much just ABA Inside Track everywhere you go.
Like us.
Like us. Please like us. And if you would like to email us with feedback or questions, or just if you have a topic you're interested in having us talk about, email us at abainsidetrack@gmail.com. Well, thanks one more time, everyone, for being here. It was a great problem-solving topic. We'll be back next week with our preview episode, but until then, keep responding. Bye!
Bye. See ya.